or our YouTube page. If you could all join me while we say the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. All right, councilors, so today what we have new on the agenda is item 169-2022, fiscal year 2023 proposed budget by Mayor Brian DePena. As you all know, between today, Wednesday, Thursday, and next Monday, we are going to be hearing presentations from the different department heads of the city, where they're going to be presenting to us the budget, and we'll be able to ask questions and get better, insights as to the thought frame when the budget was being allocated. On Monday, we also have a date up for Wednesday if there's a need to further extend conversations. When presentations are done, at that point, we will be looking to either send this to the full council with a favorable recommendation as a committee report, with a negative recommendation, or offering, regardless of any of these three motions, offering certain recommendations to the council, changes within the budget. I just want to remind those that are listening in and council members that as council members, we cannot add to the budget. We can only remove from the budget. So things to keep in mind. When we are going to be finishing the evening's conversation, I'll be looking for not a motion to adjourn, but a motion to recess. That way we can continue the conversation the following day. So please, council members, keep that in mind. While there's a certain agenda that we were going to go through, we are actually going to be taking, we're going to start with the Lawrence Police Department first. We're having some technical issues, and to ensure that Chief Vask is able to present, we will have him start the conversation. Chief Vask. Hi, Chief. So, Chief, the rest of the council members are not able to see you. If you could say something just to see if your audio is working.
Are you able to hear me, Counselor?
Yep. So we can hear you. If you can speak just a tiny little bit louder.
Sure, I can definitely do that.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Let us just move to councilors. We are on page 8, Police Department. Go ahead, Chief Vask.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you as well in the time change. I would just say, just so you know, Lieutenant Cirillo is in the building, and also Eileen Burnell, Director of Budget and Finance as well, that can also help us answer some questions if you have them. So again, thank you for the opportunity. The budget, for the most part, I would say is zeroed out in terms of the same as last year, other than the usual pay raises that are guaranteed in the contracts. We do have a couple of additions this year to the budget, which I'm happy to speak on in more detail. A deputy chief's position, which I will just go right out and say publicly was my idea and my idea alone. I've been advocating for that position for a few years, and I'm happy that it's in there, at least initially, to start the conversation. I will say about the deputy chief's position that is a position that has been one that's in most departments our size, and even some departments that are smaller. So as an example, the Haverhill Police Department has a deputy chief within the same pay structure. And the Methuen Police Department, as you know, which is half our size, also has one. Although they allocated $195, I believe, in their budget, they may have made an adjustment down to $175. But certainly a position that merits some review, certainly one that I've advocated for a few years, and certainly one that would help me to deal with, the two different unions. So if you think about my job, I do not have an individual right now that is separate from the two unions that I can consult with, that I can use. Anyone that I do now certainly has an impact on their own union membership. So it's difficult to organize and facilitate the department in that regard. And again, this isn't a position that is one that I am inventing. It's one that's been around for quite a period of time, and I'm happy to answer more on that. We created a finance officer within the department, which basically is replacing our payroll specialist. So we're adding one, but we're deleting another, and I think basically the budget will increase by 10,000 with that position. So, and that's an individual that's basically taken on a great deal of more in the job in terms of just payroll. So we're looking to change that position, and I think it's appropriate in its regard. That being said, there are some, some minuses and some pluses, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may or may not have at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Before I ask my own questions, just want to look at my colleagues, see if they have any questions they'd like to ask. Council President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm not going to be saying much. I have to relinquish the floor because we have I am now officially the 5th member, but if it's okay, I can speak from the podium. Thank you,
President.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate this opportunity to speak on this matter. So the only thing that kind of jumps out at me is the deputy chief's position for $195,000. As I understand it, Mr. Chairman, this position has been unfilled now for more than 6 months, and according to our ordinances, any positions that are unfilled for greater than 6 months need to be reauthorized. Not only does that position need to be reauthorized, but it has to, the ordinance says that the salary for that position, I believe, I don't have the exact number, but it's less than $80,000. So not only does it have to be, if that 195 sticks in the budget and they're looking to actually spend it on an individual for that position, it would need to be reauthorized, and the ordinance needs to be changed to reflect whatever it is that the council desires for that salary. So I just want to bring that to your attention, that just because it's in the budget doesn't mean it is reauthorized. All it means is that there's essentially, it seems to me as though there seems to be a placeholder of money potentially should the council decide in the future to either adopt or to introduce an ordinance that would reflect that position. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. So Chief, that was one of the questions that I was going to ask as well. In the current ordinances, it has the salary of the deputy chief to be $78,000. Is there going to be an effort to get this ordinance changed? Is there an effort to put this in front of the city council? Chief, if you can start again, Chief.
Sorry. Thank you, Council President, for your question. Certainly one that needs to be answered. And so, to your point, this position has been vacant for a number of years. And obviously, the payroll side of it is, the salary part of it is not in line with current standards. As I said in my earlier statement, Haverhill Police Department is paying $195 for theirs. Methuen Police Department is allocated $195, although there's been some back and forth with their council, and it may get readjusted to $175. But, and I would be the first to tell you that there's a lot of work to be done. Budgeting is just the first step, and obviously you pointed out there's a number of issues in the ordinance that have to be addressed and would obviously lead to further conversation. So there's more work to be done in that regard.
Thank you, Chief. My next question is around, there was a cut for the police auxiliary of $32,000. Essentially, it seems like their department is zeroed out. If you could sort of inform us as to the why of that.
Yeah, sure. So that conversation happened with the mayor and Mark Iannello, and that's why I brought Lieutenant Cirillo there. So as you know, post and the police reform has led to a lot of different issues in policing. The auxiliaries, for lack of a better word, cannot be called auxiliary police any longer. Their vehicles cannot be the same color as ours. Their uniforms cannot be the same as ours. So we're going to have to reimagine that position. And I think that's why at this time the mayor decided to zero them out. But I think that's going to lead to a further conversation about what exactly it is that their future details will be like. And I think we have to reimagine that position. So if you don't mind, Lieutenant Cirillo can maybe step up and explain that a little bit more in depth to you.
Lieutenant Cirillo?
Good evening, councilors. So again, like the chief said, due to police reform, we've had to make some changes with the auxiliary police. We've had some discussion with the chief as well as Mayor DePena to rename the auxiliary police to the Lawrence Community Action Team. Again, the auxiliaries have been in existence for decades. They go back to 1950 under the Civil Defense Act. So again, they're definitely a useful tool and a necessity that we need in the city of Lawrence. But I think with a few changes, like the chief mentioned, to conform to post and police reform, I think we can do that, and we can relatively keep it the same with some minor changes. And the minor changes, again, like the chief said, uniforms, cruisers, and a couple of their duties, so to speak. You know, they can't perform police functions, meaning like patrols or special checks, but they can still continue with the main functions that we need them for. And again, that's fires, crime scenes, natural disasters, unnatural disasters. Again, everybody remembers the gas explosions. They were, you know, essential to operations in the city. So again, a lot of your parades, your festivals, churches, and, you know, the list goes on and on, all the things that they do. So again, this is certainly something that I believe the city can't do without, the citizens of Lawrence can't do without, and certainly the police department and fire department can't do without. So again, I would encourage to relook at that. Again, I'm not quite sure why there was a zero there. I know $32,000 was in their budget last year, and that went to uniforms, supplies, the internet, their phones, and again, they definitely need a operating budget.
Okay, so if I understand it correctly, there has to be some type of changes that are going to be done between now and the next year.
We've already been in the process since last year doing it, councilors. We're getting them new uniforms. The cruises have been changed already. They're being new lights are being put on top. So a lot of the changes have already been implemented. So again, I don't think it's a thing where it's going to take a long time to get them up and running. I think we can get them up and running in the next couple of weeks.
But how are you going to be able to do that if their budget is zeroed out?
Well,
So
again,
where's the money? Where would the money be coming from?
right now, there's a little bit of money left till the end of the year, so we could probably get through to the end of the year. But again, yeah, we'll be in a problem if we don't fund them for next year.
Okay, councilors, any questions? Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. Chief, I have a few questions, as well as the lieutenant. So now that we're talking about auxiliary police, I also hear that there is a lot of union setbacks in terms of the auxiliary police, not only in Lawrence, but in a lot of different cities and towns throughout Massachusetts. So can you provide us what is on the actual police reforms that is been leading a couple of communities to make those determinations? Obviously, Lawrence went to the extreme of sitting it out the budget, but I wanted to know more like getting that information from the actual reform and not the interpretation of perhaps few different departments. I wanted to kind of like, you know, get to the bottom of line of that, because I mean, so far since I'm being in the council, I've been pushing hard for the community police to, the auxiliary police to actually have a budget, and a budget that is a decent budget. Obviously, $32,000 is nothing, but it was better than what it was 5-6 years ago, which was $16,000. Last year I get doubled out. This year gets zeroed out. That's crazy, and to me that doesn't make any sense. And I wanted to kind of like, get with information, get to actually what the police reform is saying about auxiliary police. So that doesn't have to be done today. Obviously, we're talking about a general a budget.
So I can
next time, I would like to actually
I
get
can
to that.
address what police reform is saying about auxiliary. They do not mention the auxiliary police in the reform. What they do tell you is that they cannot perform a police function, auxiliary police officers. Well, they mention that they can't perform a police function, but what they do go on to say is that, like I said, during the Civil Defense Act, they've been around since the 1950s, where you've had a civilian unit, emergency management system in place, where they would come in to assist police, fire at major incidents.
I don't know if you get what I'm coming from. There is a couple of communities that are fighting this through the unions, through the police unions, and the police reform being one tool that is in place, and mention a few things. The interpretation is bigger than what is there, and essentially what I want to get to the bottom line is like, do we have to do, or what are the leeways that we can use, or a loophole that we can use, if any, understanding the importance of the auxiliary police to the department as well as to the community. Knowing the fact that we are a very dense community, having more bodies that are not doing necessarily what a regular police do, but do important duties, it is essential for a lot of events, and like you mentioned before. But it's been a fight in multiple communities with the unions, not necessarily the reforms. It's the union. And it is tough to say that here, but that's the reality. The last thing a lot of people wanted to say is what I'm saying. The union are fighting the auxiliary police. The auxiliary police in Lawrence is a different gig. We need them. We need them. So just going by what a few communities are saying is not convenience for us. So we need to find that out. We need to go to the bottom line on that and make sure that the auxiliary police is back to have proper fund. And to answer to Councilor Payano, questions as to how we're going to put that money back. The mayor is the only one that can put the money back, but we are the only one that can approve the budget. So it's a balance there. Have to be a balance. And knowing the importance of that issue, it is important that we have that discussion in a deep way, not necessarily taking what is convenience for a few. And the auxiliary police is extremely important in the city of Lawrence. That's one thing that I would like to go over. I mean, the information doesn't have to be said today, but I want to make sure that we, during this time, have a sit and talk about that, a little deep conversation.
Thank you, Counselor. You have some more follow-ups. Go ahead, Counselor Rodriguez. Chief, you have to give it, when you speak, you have to give it a moment so that way they can turn on your mic. Try now.
So if you like, I could just give you a quick, my thoughts on the auxiliary police, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
So first and foremost, as Lieutenant Cirillo said, we think very highly of our auxiliary police here. We're just trying to deal with the new era of police reform and coming up with another way of being able to use them in the way we are now, because to your point, Councilor Rodriguez, we certainly need them. So that's why we're going changing the color of their vehicles, changing the color of their uniforms. We're probably going to call them something different because under police reform, they can't have anything on their vehicles or their uniforms that say police. So we're going to reimagine what they do here in the community, and we're going to come up with that. And the conversations that I've had with the mayor is when we come up with that piece of legislation, if you will, then we'll be able to go back to him with a funding request and get some money, hopefully, in free cash. So that's kind of the idea right now, but there's still work to be done and progress in that regard as well. But it's certainly not something that I take lightly or we take lightly. The auxiliaries are something we desperately need here.
Thank you,
Councilor
Chief.
Rodriguez.
Sure. I was, through you, Mr. Chair, I was a little late to the section, and I don't know if you guys get to talk about the captain, $103,000 cut.
Not yet. That was going to be my next question.
Okay, so it can be a joint question. So, like, by all means, I would like to know more from you guys as of why we cutting $103,000 on the captains.
So Chief, yeah, Chief, if you just give it a moment, so that way they can give you the mic. I think you're probably good now.
Sorry about that. I think Eileen Burnell could probably speak to that, but again, it's an elimination of one position. But Eileen, if you wouldn't mind letting the councils know about that?
So just as an FYI, according to the budget, there is no change. It's 3 positions, but there's a negative of 100,000.
Yeah, if I could just explain briefly, last year it was, there was only 3 people in the position, but there was funding for 4. We picked up on that this year, and so we limited the funding and the number of positions to 3. So there's no change, it just was an extra amount in the budget last year.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Fair enough. So, Chief, I wanted to hear your thought about the approach that the previous administration took on the mental health clinicians, and the importance of those 2 positions last year. But this year, I can see that those positions has been cut. Okay, so please explain.
Thank you, Councilor. I apologize. In the budget, in line 53...
If you can state your name for the record, please.
I apologize, Councilor. Eileen Burnell, 257 Mount Vernon Street, Lawrence, Mass. I am the Director of Support Services at the Lawrence Police Department. In the budget, in the 5,300 line item under purchase services, there's the same $1,700 in an increase. What is the $1,700? What we found was clinicians need insurance and oversight and licensing that we really are better able to provide through outsourcing and contracting with Pentucket Medical, or one of the companies called the Advocates, is a much better resource for the city than to try to hire that person internally when we really don't have the criteria to judge those people. So we found that outsourcing that as a subcontract was a better way to so that money is still in our budget. We are using that, and it is, but I just want to make sure you understand why it's.
And just to recap, on page 71, under professional services, you will see that there's an additional $117,000
Which
there.
is the same exact amount of money.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the clarification. I want to ask you 2 more questions, and then I can hand over the floor. So, in page 77, everything on that page has been cut or reduced. Can you go over that, the whole page? And I also would like to know the schedule for the animal control officers, and how that work. So page 70.
So, Council, if you look on
77?
77, one of the things that when you look at the actual expenditures, it looks very low, and the actual expenditures as of today, which is only, 5 or 6 weeks after that, that was April 6th, now it's May 31st, so 2 months later. As the chief mentioned, we had to change their vehicles, have them repainted. That was $4,600. We had to then have them built out, change the light bars. That's $3,300. So just changing the vehicles alone was over $8,000, and that's been done in the last month. Similarly, changing the lettering on those vehicles is another $1,000. You look at like their phone bills. We do those in annual POs. We were using an old one, now we have a new one, but their National Grid bill, their Verizon bill, and their Comcast cable bill, that equals up to about $6,000, which was the total allocation for them for that. Similarly, with the changeovers, they had some uniform replacement, but we're replacing more uniforms. So when you look at these expenditures to date, it looks like they've only spent about half the money, but as of April, that was the case, but it was because we were waiting for the reform stuff to know exactly what we could and couldn't do with it, because we want to make sure that they have equipment that best works for them. So they have actually spent almost all of their money when you look at the 32,000. So I don't want anyone to walk away thinking, well, we gave them 32 and they didn't use it, because they absolutely did use it. It just, the bulk of it was spent in April and May, when we knew what the reforms were going to be and what we could and couldn't put on their vehicles, what kind of light bars they would be required to have, what colors their vehicles could be, what their uniforms could say. We know what they couldn't say. So based on those changes, we had to wait to spend that money, but it has been spent. So I want to make sure, as of April 6th, that number was right. It was 15,000. As of today, it's much closer to 32,000. So I don't want you to think they don't use their money. I think that was your question, Counselor, and I hope that answered it. Yeah.
The second question was in regard to the animal control.
Sure.
We have had the conversation of the overtime for the animal
Yeah.
control for quite some time.
Yeah.
And some of the usage of that overtime was that they need to come over during the weekend and take care of some business. I know that in the last year or 2 years ago, we changed that as of how we take care of the animal. I think that we're using a vendor or something. So how that changed in terms of cutting off the whole overtime line item?
Sure. So the one line that's missing on that part of the budget doesn't show the actual expenditure of overtime for animal control. We actually do spend a little over $15,000 every year on animal control, and we usually make it up with money from the police department budget. Contractually, if the animal control officer has to come in, which anytime we have animals in the shelter, they have to be fed. We can't leave them there Friday till Monday. So they are checked on once. So every weekend, one officer is on duty for at least 4 hours. They would handle any calls that come in and then check on the animals. So that's by contract with them, that they have to get paid overtime to come in to do that. Their schedule is Monday through Friday. We have them on a split shift, so usually one works like 7 to 3, the other one works more like 10 to 6, so that there's as much coverage as we can get. And then they have some coverage together in the middle of the day so that they're both on it, sometime together. But all that being said, we do use their overtime money. So I'm not sure how the final budget will look, if there'll be some money put back in there or not, but it's not something that we were anticipating having cut.
Councilor Rodriguez? Go ahead, Councilor.
Page 73, the grants reimbursement. 2 years, it was negative, last year it was negative 620. This year, it was also negative 620. What that means? That means that we're applying for less grants. I know that you've been here for a long, many times, different grants up. What is that mean?
Sure, what that line means is that money that we're bringing in, so they're cutting our budget by 620, presuming that we're going to collect at least $620,000 in grant money to cover things that might be in the budget. So that's why that line item stays the same, because they're anticipating that we will collect at least $620,000 of grant money to cover line items that are covered in the budget, to balance it out, so that we're not getting a surplus.
seeing that there's, Council.
Two questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the auxiliary police, how many members of the auxiliary police do we currently have?
33, Counselor.
33 and a $32,000 budget. If we get the auxiliary police to do the limited work that they do, that would bring, I'm assuming, right? That would bring flexibility to the police, and also will be less money paid on overtime. So it will be more money for you guys, or more money, or less money for the city to spend. Is that correct? They work for free, isn't it?
Correct, correct. They work for free. And again, what they do is they allow us to free up officers to take calls. So again, you have a large fire where you're blocking off streets, or a flood or something of those in that nature. They can get there and they can do traffic in that area, which frees up police and officers to hit their back on the road.
So this is just a comment. So I think that we could invest $32,000 when they're going to give us and service more than $32,000. No more questions.
Thank you, councilors. Just one quick statement. Chief, there are several positions in this budget in your department that probably need to be seen. We need to go through the personnel committee and and change the ordinance. Some of them, the differences between what's in ordinance and what is being asked for in this budget is completely different, even though there might not be a change for between last year and next year. I would ask that in the following weeks, next couple of months, that your department submits those changes to the city council. That way, personnel and the ordinance committee can review them. That being said, I think that there are certain things that are worrying us around the department. I understand that it sounds like you guys are going to be looking into what the changes are and then asking us for money from free cash. I would hope that as you guys are thinking it through, that you're involving council members, and you're involving auxiliary members, both past and present, to be part of those conversations, and that the conversations move, quickly. I think, one of my worries is that while there's this brainstorming and there's sort of this figuring out what's next, that there's no money in the budget for supplies. That is worrying. I think that it might have been better to have something there for supplies just for right now. But I am sure that you guys have a plan for that, and we'll be looking forward to hearing that. That being said, I know that there a special meeting that should be occurring now. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. I will ask one of my colleagues to make a motion to recess. Is there a second? There's a motion to recess by Councilor Rodriguez, second by Councilor Levy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Good evening. This is the special meeting of the Lawrence City Council. Today is Tuesday, May 31st, 2020. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be hybrid, allowing participation both in person and in the City Council chambers and remotely. It is in Zoom, which the meeting code is listed on the agenda. The meeting may also be viewed through the digital platforms such as Facebook, Lawrence City Council page, YouTube, Lawrence City Council page, and please note that our elevator still is out, but we do expect that it'll be back by the end of June. Whoa! That's not good. So the elevator's out for a little while longer. Access is provided by remote participation as detailed above. Since this is a special meeting, I will do our normal meeting stuff. I know that it's kind of been redundant, but would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then first with a moment of silence. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Levy.
Counselor.
Absent.
Counselor Levy. Present.
Counselor De La Cruz. Absent. Counselor Payano.
Present.
Counselor Estela Reyes. Absent. Counselor Rodriguez.
Present.
Counselor Del Rosario.
Present.
Counselor Selena Reyes.
Present.
Counselor Infante.
Present.
President Plan.
Present. Will you please call the roll for Counselor De La Cruz?
Counselor De La Cruz.
Present.
Thank you. Counselors, we have two new business items that are going to be sent to the Personnel Committee. Document number 17522, job posting for city clerk position that I placed on the council agenda. That will be going to Personnel. Document 17622, review of the city clerk candidates or applicants. I would place that on the agenda. That is going to the Personnel Committee. At this point, that is all the business for this evening's meeting. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Payano, seconded by Counselor Levy. Clerk, please call the roll.
Infante.
Yes.
Counselor Selena Reyes.
Yes.
Counselor Del Rosario.
Yes.
Counselor Rodriguez.
Yes.
Vice President Estela Reyes. Counselor Payano.
Yes.
Counselor De La Cruz.
Yes.
Counselor Levy.
Yes.
President Plant.
Yes, the special meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, counselors.
Councilors, is there a motion to come? Councilors, is there a motion to come back out of recess?
So move.
There's been a motion that's been made by Councilor Rodriguez, has been seconded by Councilor Del Rosario. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. We are back from recess. Let us, Director Ianello, if you could join us. We will start at the top with revenue review.
Yeah, Councilors, I'd like to start revenue review. I'd like to start on page 12. That's the high level, on page 12 is the very highest level of the revenues and expenditures for the city. On page, and you can see on the top of page 12, the general fund, the total operating revenues equal $373 million, and the expenditures for this general fund is also $373 million. So it's a balanced budget. Also on page 12 and 13 are the summarized version of the enterprise funds. We have parking, garage and lots enterprise fund. That has $809,000 in revenues expected. The airport has $615,000 in revenues they're anticipating. And water and sewer has $22.8 million in revenues they anticipate. So as I indicated on page 12 and 13 is just very high level. And you can see the revenues are broken down on page 12 to approximately 10 categories. That totals up to $373.9 million. And if you flip to page 14, that's the details of what you see on page 12. All the details are on page 14. So for example, the first item is taxes and excise at $90,170,000 on page 12. And on page 14, you'll see the details of that $90,170,000. It's broken out into personal property tax and real property tax. Motor vehicle excise are the highest three items in that category. Charges for services, which is $2 million on page 12, is broken out on page 15 to all the specific revenue codes that we use, equaling the $2,057,000. Some of the larger items included in charges for services are downtown parking. We're hoping to get the parking meters back on. That's our parking a parking meter revenue that our employees, when they ticket vehicles, come in, and it's also, we're hoping to get some parking back from a private vendor when we reopen the meters. Some of the other items in this account are, sure.
Director Arnell, is a question. Councilor Rodriguez?
Yep. Page 15 is the, page 15 is the detail of the charges for services. And you can see in the mayor's recommendation column, it totals $2,057,050. And all of the accounts that comprise that $2 million are listed in detail. There's 20 or 30 line items there. So I was just pointing out some of the higher numbers that are included in that description, charges for services. On page 12, the next item is the licenses and permits for $1.8 million. And when you flip to page 16, you'll see a category, licenses and permits. Again, there's about 20 or 30 line items which comprise the details of the $1,842,600. And some of the larger items in this category are building permits from the ISD, electrical permits from the fire department, and a few other permits such as that. The next line item on page 12 is federal revenue. And you can see on page 16, federal revenue is really just comprised of two items, which is Medicaid reimbursement, and we get some money from the Lawrence Housing Authority. The next largest category on page 12 is, or our largest revenue source is state revenue, 271.9 million, and that's broken out on the bottom of page 16, and there's about 6 or 8 line items which comprise that state aid. And I'll point out that the largest item is school chapter 70 aid, $240.7 million is coming in from the state to support the school department's budget. The other item I'd like to point out on page 16 is the next to last line on that page, which is unrestricted general government aid, which is 22.1 million, which is a little higher than the previous year and a little bit higher than the year before that. The governor has been trying to increase that item by 2.5% every year. So we're looking good there. The next item is other intergovernmental revenues, and those are identified on page 17. And there's about 6 or 7 line items which comprise the intergovernmental revenue category. These are, the largest is parking violation fines. Those are the parking tickets that I referred to earlier. Those are the actual parking fines that are collected, and then some other civil motor vehicle infractions. And then the miscellaneous revenue is the next category. We just have included here some interest income. On page 16, there's only a couple items, interest income and miscellaneous revenue of $33,500. And then the other financing sources identified on page 17 are the transfers from the enterprise fund of $880,000 roughly, and then our largest item is a transfer from free cash to support this operating budget is $4,860,775. So that's on page 17.
Director Ianniello, can you just repeat that last part?
Yep. I'm gonna, on page 17, the second line from the bottom is, you'll see our third line from the bottom is transfer from general fund free cash, $4,860,775. And that's the amount of free cash we're taking out of, or the amount of free cash we're taking to support the general government operating, general fund operating expenses of the city of Lawrence. That is primarily due to, again, the Oliver, the Leahy, and the police station were all approved last year. And I did indicate that in order to afford all those without a property tax increase, we would have to take some money out of free cash.
Councilor Rodriguez?
That's correct. That's correct.
Councilor Rodriguez, follow up?
Yep.
When it comes to the parking resource and revenues.
Okay, yep. The parking
But you
revenues.
were mentioning on the general fund, but I mean, I didn't follow up on the line on page 12.
Oh, on page 12, there's parking revenues in the charges for services section. I'm sorry, no, yeah, charges for services section on line 5 or 6 down, we're estimating 700,000 from downtown parking. That's the details on page 15. It's, I think it's the 6th line from the top. You'll see on page 15, you'll see treasurer's downtown parking, treasury downtown parking. It's from the treasurer's accounts,
But I think that
$700,000.
you were mentioning.
Is that what you were referring to?
No, I think that you were, yeah, at some point you mentioned the contractual parking.
Oh, that's the parking meters. The parking meters that we have, they've been out of service since the pandemic. And in this budget, the mayor does plan on getting those parking meters back operational, and that's what we're anticipating to get $700,000, we hope. On page 15, the sixth line down from the top, 700,000 is our estimate. Yes.
No, well, no. That's 700,000. Director Iannello, was there more to your presentation?
I think, that pretty much concludes the revenue piece. That's the revenue review. Again, the revenues are summarized on page 12 in just 6 line items for the public who may be following at home. And then for the public wants to see the details of that 373 million, they turn to page 14, 15, 16, and 17, and all of the details are, there's probably 100-plus line items that comprise that $373.9 million. So that pretty much, as a nutshell, is the revenue presentation. I went over quickly also the revenues for the park, the enterprise funds, the parking, the airport, and the water sewer fund.
Thank you, Director Iannello. So I think at this point, we can sort of pause there and see if there are questions. I know I have a couple questions, so I'll start us off. Could you go back on page 14, personal property taxes? There's a decrease. We're expecting less money to come in.
That's the, just hang on one second, that's the personal property, that's the actual personal property from last year. Our actual personal property from last year, we collected we budgeted 9.1 million. This year, we're estimating 8.6 million. Last year, in our forecast, we estimate approximately 1.2 million in new growth every year, of which we've been getting a lot of new growth from Columbia Gas because of the explosion. And now we're back to kind of normal, back to normalcy. So our estimate for the tax levy this year, breakout between personal and real estate, is 8.6 million for personal and 73.3 million for real estate portion of the property taxes.
Okay, so it sounds
So
like,
in total, it's still going up.
okay. If we move down to penalties and interest tax liens, there's a change of negative 459,000.
Yes, we estimated 650,000 in last year's budget. This year, as you can see, if you look at the FY21 actual, we only collected 192,000, and so far through fiscal 22, we've only collected 78,000 through April 6th. So we're reducing our estimate down to 191,000, closer to the previous year. And again, those are we've been collecting a lot of our back taxes, so that's a good sign. We're not collecting, people are paying their bills on time. We're not collecting a lot of interest and penalties from our taxpayers. I would like to just point one thing that I want to just point out with the property taxes that I mentioned a moment ago. This budget does not include the increase due to Proposition 2.5. Proposition 2.5 would allow us to increase the tax levy an additional 2.2 million. So this budget has a 0% increase in property taxes for FY23. The one thing we do have in here, however, is the new growth, and we've estimated at 1.2 million. The reason why the change from the prior year seems to be much higher is the final taxes that went out when the council set the tax rate in December of last year after the budget was created. That changed our mix. The actual, like for example, in this budget, we're estimating new growth at 1.2 million. If new growth comes in at 2.4 million, we'll obviously have more when we file the tax recap, those budgeted numbers will increase. That's what happened in the prior year. We did estimate, I think, 1.2 million when we prepared the 22 budget, but the actual new growth came in at over, let me see if I think I have it here, if I can read it. Our actual new growth last year came in at 2.2 million, over $1 million more than we anticipated. So this year we've estimated, actually our new growth estimate for this year is 1.3 million, 1,314,260. We increased it a little bit for rounding, But by and large, our new growth has been extraordinarily high in FY '20 and '21, and in '22, we were pleasantly surprised when it still increased over $2 million, but we're putting it back to where it has been in 2013 to 18. We used to use about 1.3 to 1.6 million per year in new growth.
I have two more questions, Director Ianniello. So on page 17, we have, there's a change to 925,000 for parking violation fines. We believe that we're going to see an increase of 225,000. Why do we believe that there's going to be an increase?
Well, in FY '21, we collected 941,000. That's our last complete year. So we're hoping to collect that. We kind of pushed up these revenues as high as we could to make it so we didn't have a tax increase this year. But we did, and so far we've received 715,000 through April 6th. So we have a couple months to go, so we're hoping to hit the 900,000 mark.
My last question is around the 4.8 million from that we're taking out of free cash. Can you explain that just a little bit more? So we're taking that money, like what is that funding?
Yep.
Is it one-time things? Is it things that, basically we're going to be looking at again, next year? I think we just, it'd be great to get a better understanding
Yep.
of, why we're taking this money from free cash, where it's going to, and, we will probably want to ensure that we're not taking money from our reserves to pay something that we'll always have to pay.
Yeah, as you recall, councilors, when we approved well, let me just preface what is in the 4.8 million roughly is supporting the general fund because we don't have a Prop 2.5 increase, which is about $2 million. Most of this, however, is debt. We cut the budget to kind of make up for the Prop 2.5 shortfall. But we do have, the Leahy School was the override that failed, and then we were able to, because of our ARPA, because of our Columbia gas explosion, those ARPA funds that we receive pretty much can be turned into free cash. We have that unique circumstance where our ARPA revenue loss exceeds the whole ARPA funds that were received of $57.3 million. So that gave us a unique opportunity to fund the Leahy School without a tax increase because we could use our ARPA funds for that. And the council, we came to the council in I believe it was February, we got our bond authorization. The council approved the bond authorization, and it was with the caveat that because of we did the Oliver School without a tax increase. We did the police station without a tax increase. That was about $9 million. The Oliver School was a $130 million project, and the Leahy School is a $103 million project. All of those projects were done without a tax override. And so I mentioned to the council that the only way to pay the debt service on those two schools and the police station would be we have to have a planned use of free cash for about 13 years. It was when we first approved the Oliver School, I indicated to the council that we'd have to have a planned use of free cash for about 8 to 10 years because that's how long our existing debt in 10 years from now will disappear because that's old debt that's getting paid off. And the Oliver School would replace that debt. And so for about 8 years or so to 10 years, we'd have to take money out of free cash, a couple million a year to subsidize the Oliver School. So when the Leahy School came on, that's another $2.2 million of debt service that has to be paid for annually, and that's what comprises this 4.8 million. The Oliver School, the police station to a certain degree, and the Leahy School. We did just, I might add, since we just sold bonds last week for the Leahy School, and we received just a fraction under 4%, which was really great. However, to put that in perspective, when we borrowed for the Oliver School, several months ago, we got about a 2.5% rate on the sale of the Oliver School bonds. So the market has increased substantially in just, 4 or 5 short months. But we were ecstatic to get a less than 4%, because I guess some have been above 4%. So our latest bond rating increase, and we take advantage of the Qualified Bond Act, and we borrow at the state's better bond rating rate. We were able to get a less than 4% rate, and we had 6 bidders, so it was quite, companies or brokerage houses favor our bonds, so we got a good mix there.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions on this section? Or should we move on to debt services?
No, I just would like him to clarify one little thing.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes. On page, through you, Mr. Chair, on page 17, when you were referring to the new growth, can you point that amount that you mentioned? I mean, is that the 1,238,000, or that's
No,
another
the
page?
million, the new growth of 1.3 million, which I have in this budget, is included in on page 14, under the real estate and personal property. There's, the personal property number is 8,647,000, and 8,647,000 is comprised of, includes 726,300 new growth. The property tax line item on page 14 of 73,346,000 is comprised of 587,960 of new growth, and the total of those two new growth numbers is 1.3 million. So it's included in the property tax levy.
Okay. Can you
Follow up?
Can you please, please, sir?
What?
I have the floor, so.
Yeah, you can follow up.
Can you please send me an email clarifying that tomorrow?
The breakdown of the, I'll send you this. This is quite, maybe you want to call me when you receive it, but it has all the calculations for it.
If you need to highlight a few
Yep.
things that you think is important for
Yep.
me to clearly understand, please.
Yeah, while we're on the tax subject, it might add that the city right now has, last year, we didn't go up to 2.5% in property taxes last year, so our excess taxing capacity was 8.4 million. This budget, again, by not going up to 2.5%, giving the residents a break, we would have an excess tax levy capacity of 10.7 million. And I might add that we had our ratings call with Standard & Poor's a couple of weeks ago, and that was one of the things they asked, are we using any of the excess tax levy capacity, or did we still preserve it? So I indicated to them that we had the whole 8.4 million preserved, and we planned on increasing the excess capacity to another 10.6 million. And obviously, the ratings company were concerned about that number, because if real estate values start to drop, will we get hurt? And they have to drop quite a ways before we get hurt. We're really, really good shape. So we have, our excess tax levies capacity is 10.7 million roughly.
And I would like to, for you to please send us the current balance for the ARPA fund. I know that we actually transferred for free cash. And at some point you mentioned that the free cash balance was about $15 million, but I know that the ARPA fund should be.
Yeah, when we
Different.
close the books, we'll charge, actually, we're gonna do it in 2 lump sums. There's one item in the budget, our tuition assessment from the state for the school department's about 33 million. We're gonna transfer that expense to the ARPA fund, which will reduce the general fund operating expenses by 30 million. So when we close the books, we'll have a $35 million, $33 million surplus, which will, the state, we expect to certify to free cash. So, and then we're gonna do the same thing next year. So we'll have just 2 transactions in our ARPA account, which will be these state and county transfers. So it'll be really easy to be audited. The federal government, we don't have all these expenses that we have to explain. So that's a strategy we've set out with our auditors, Powers and Sullivan, to make sure we calculated the revenue loss correctly, and that we have a strategy to use it. So makes our audit a little easier.
Can you please send that information over?
Yeah, I'm going to make a note of that.
Thank you.
Councilors, are there any other questions? Council President?
Thank you, and I'm sorry I'm late to the party. I do have one revenue question. Would it be in order to ask that question now?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to go to motor vehicle excise taxes. I know that there has been a tremendous spike in the number of vehicles in the city, and if it's already been addressed, my apologies, I was not listening to that. I just want to make sure that the numbers that are really that the budget reflects the true numbers that we expect to see through motor vehicle excise taxes. And in my conversations with the city assessor's office, you know, at this point, we have over 64,000 registered vehicles. Of course, that's a 55% increase since 2010. And then we are scheduled at least apples to apples for this year compared to last year. I think there's a few more thousand, and that's just a rough estimate at this point. But I just want to make sure that if there's an opportunity to accurately adjust the numbers, that the numbers on page 14, motor vehicles is 4150. I know it's been raised by $600,000. Is that
Yeah, we estimate.
That's reality.
We estimated 6.1 million for motor vehicle excise. We collected 6,180,000 in FY '21, the last full year. And we expect, we're hoping that it's that high. 6.1 million is a little bit less than 2 years ago. So far this year, we've collected 4.5 million through April 6th, but March is when the major motor vehicle excise bill goes in. So we're hoping that in FY '22, we'll exceed 6 million as well. So we're looking back at the history of motor vehicle excise, and just looking back in 2017, we collected roughly $5 million in motor vehicle excise. The following year, in 18, we collected 5.5 million. In 19, we collected 5.6 million. In 20, we had, again, 5.6 million again. And in 21, it jumped to 6.180. So we're always around that 5.5 to 6 million range for the last several years. So if we're off, we might be off. Maybe if motor vehicle excise taxes do go down, it's possible. But highly unlikely, because as you indicated, the assessor, more vehicles were put on the road this year than the previous year. So we expect that number to increase again. But again, normally we try and keep our revenues as conservative as possible. We pushed them up a little bit this year because we're trying to balance this budget without a tax increase and trying not to use as much free cash as we could. We're trying to keep the numbers conservative. So we'll see what happens with this year. But I'm confident that it'll be very close to 6.1 million.
So just for the record, Mr. Chairman, it's early, but this is an April estimate by the assessor. He was looking at over 1,900 new vehicles for this year in addition to, so that 63 is going to be going, actually that's 64,504 autos in 2020 and 2021 will most likely continue to grow up by almost 2,000 more vehicles. And so obviously that's money coming in, which is a good thing, but there's
That's
other
right.
impacts as well. My last question, so we can move on. With all the new housing units that are being into the city, where, and I've been banging the drum about the concerns regarding that, where's the benefits? Where can we see the increased revenues coming in from all of these new housing units?
Well, again, for this budget we've presented, we estimate, I have the assessors go through all the building permits and all the things that you indicated, and they're comfortable with a $1.3 million new growth number. If some of these properties exceed those estimates, I mean, again, last year we estimated 1.2 million for new growth, but it actually came in at over 2.2 million in new growth. So that may happen again, but we're preparing the budget I asked the assessor to give me his best estimate of what new growth would be without, with information that he knows now. But they do have RRC, their consulting firm, out doing inspections of property. And once they complete those inspections, which usually is in the early fall, that's when we may find we have a little bit more of an opportunity. We may have new growth that may, hopefully it'll exceed 2 million again. But that's his best guess, and that's what we put the budget together with, the 1.3 million.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director Ianello, thank you for that. If we can move on to debt services.
Okay. Debt services is, I'm just going to point you to the very last
And that is page 152.
page 152 of the book. That's the detail. On page 152, the very last page, is the detail of all our bonds, and and on the top half are all the school bonds, and the bottom half are all the general fund bonds, if you will, all other bonds. And I just want to note that on the very last line is we had an estimate in there for the Leahy School, which is, if you add up the principal and interest, is about 2.3 million. And when we sold bonds last week, that 2.3 million was accurate. And so we don't have a problem with the bonds that we sold last week. So our estimate for.
Sorry, Director Ianello, can you point out which line item are you speaking on?
Yep, the very, on
Is it
page.
school loan interest?
Page 152, you see the top half of the schedule has school, and the bottom half has general government. And if you look at the school details, there's about 15 bonds, the lines.
Director Ianello.
Yes.
So on page 152, what we have is
I'm
just.
sorry,
debt
it's
services.
182, I'm sorry.
182,
Sorry.
okay.
The very last page,
All right.
it's so tiny, I thought it said 152, you're on the same
That
page.
makes,
The very last budget
okay.
page. And these are the details.
This makes more sense.
Of our bonds. So you can see each bond that's outstanding under the school, and then also general government bonds. And you can see if the third column from the right is the principal payment, FY23 principal payment is totaling 8.3 million. The FY23 interest on that debt is going to be 6.4 million, and that's totaled down below of 14,811,073 as our annual debt service for FY20, required debt service for FY23. In the prior year, that number was about 9.8 million or 10 million. So it's up about 4.8 million, which is approximately the amount that we're transferring from free cash to balance this budget.
Director Ianello, I just have one question. So initially, when we were talking about the money that was coming out of free cash, the 4.8 million, 4,860,000, you said it was to essentially pay for debt services. So this money that's here, this change of 4,044,000, is that the amount? Like, why doesn't that equal the full 4,860,000?
Well, the difference between last year's debt service and this year's debt service is exactly 4,044,000, which is on page 153. And the amount that we're requiring from taking out of free cash is 4.8 million. So the amount that we're balancing to help the general fund operating budget is, we didn't go up with a 2.5% increase this year. That's about 2.2 million. It's exactly 2,242,469 is the normal Prop 2.5. So we didn't go up that 2.2 million, but we did have to go up the 4 million. Our debt service increased 4 million, so that's about 6.2 million. We're only taking 4.8 million out of free cash. We're able to find the difference within our accounts.
Thank you. Councilors, any other questions? Seeing none, if we can move on to risk management.
Risk management's a little easier. That's on page 159. And that's, risk management is our property insurance on all the buildings. The school department pays for their share of the property insurance bill is mainly at the school department. So this is the city's share for this city properties, if you will. And then also the auto insurance for all of the vehicles within the city. So that's delineated on page 159. Property insurance, we have 118,000, which is 18,000 more than the prior year. And we have 450,000 estimated for auto insurance for all of the city's vehicles at $450,000. And that's the same as FY '22. We spent approximately $352,000 last year. We did have we've spent $375,000 so far through April 6th, and we have a few more bills to pay, but so our estimate for next year would be $450,000, based on the premiums that our insurance carriers provided us. Our auto insurance runs on a calendar year, so the last half of next year is always a guess. So we have 6 months where we don't really know what the rate is, but we have 6 months of actually knowing what the rate is. So we estimate.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Director Anello, how we actually figured it out, the actual amount for that the school department pays and the city pays?
We have all the properties are listed, and the insurance carrier breaks out the bill for us by property.
By property, okay. So on the auto insurance, I noticed that the state have different policies in terms of the auto insurance. So if any employee is going out of the state, they need to be listed because the insurance is different. Have we looked into that section? Because the state have a tremendous saving by doing that, ensuring that vehicles that are insured by the state cannot go out of the state limits. And that's a tremendous saving that they have. If people live in another state, they need to leave the properties, and I know that we have adopted that policy here in Lawrence. They need to leave the vehicles on state property. So, and that's essentially the way, one of the reasons they doing so is because they reduce the amount of insurance they pay for the motor vehicle. So, you probably don't have the answer now.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't heard of that. I'd have to ask our insurance carrier, is there a discount if we limit vehicles to just within Massachusetts and not outside of Massachusetts? Would we get a discount, or would there be a break in the insurance premium? But I'm not familiar with that one, so I'm going to write it down and ask our agent about it.
Thank you. Thank you for taking that question down and finding out about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilors, are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Director Ianello. We will now move on to City Council. Council President, would you like to take the podium?
Would you like me to take the podium or start from here?
Yeah, I think it makes sense if you take the podium. Yeah, thank you. All right, councilors, I know you've all prepared all the hard questions for now, but let's give them the time to present, and then we'll throw them all the hard balls.
Councilors, good evening, and thank you so much. This is our budget. Not a lot of changes from years past. A couple of things of note. We did put aside some money for translation services that didn't come up, but I just finished having a meeting this evening to see if we can move that again. And so that will be moving with a couple of members of our committee, with Councilor Selena Reyes and Councilor Stephanie Infante. And they're going to be looking at some options and cost options. But we needed to put some funding into the system so that we're able to go ahead and do that. One of the places that we've been asked for some increases is with our help right here. This evening I actually got a a copy of a letter looking for a request for some of the folks who are doing the minutes. And so I believe there's 9 of them, so I think these are for everybody, these. And so, so we're probably going to have a discussion regarding an increase of a stipend for folks who are doing the work to do our minutes and do the work outside of that. What that dollar amount is probably still being discussed, but we did get a request, and I'm happy to share that request with you that I just received this evening. So that's there. There are some increases that are on here that that are a little unexpected, but not necessarily in a bad place. So I do sense with prices going up on a number of different things that we can probably use it. As usual, counselors, this is I look to manage the office, but I need input from members. And so if there are things that we need, I'm certainly willing to go ahead and depending on the item and the budget and all that stuff, definitely would take that into consideration as we try to make our experience here better, to get the tools that we need to make better decisions. So I'll leave it there and answer any questions that you might have.
Counselors, any questions? Counselor Rodriguez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Council President, I have a few questions, and this is in regard to some of the expenditures that some of the councilors have to go through. And some of the councilors and myself have talked about having an amount of money on the budget that is a discretion of the council to spend, perhaps, if we need to do some a plaque or to somebody that we choose to, that money is there, and we don't have to perhaps have a long conversation that we have it not by right, but as an agreement between the council president and the councilors. Did you actually have you think about that at all?
Sure, if it's the council's will, listen, if it makes sense to us and we're taking care of the things we need to take care of, and we do have some stuff that's available to us, of course, we can't add to this, but we do have, I think, some abilities here to be creative, to maybe do some expenditures as we see fit, if that makes any sense. So if there, I mean, I don't think we can be handing out, as you can imagine, plaques to everybody that comes into the door, but if we're judicious and we make some sense, and that makes some sense to all of us, I think we can go ahead and do something like that.
This year so far, I believe Councilor Estela Reyes have paid for most of the plaque that we have. I split a few with her, and she always been on top of payments, but I think it's not fair if we have a budget that we need to actually use our funds to actually pay for something that is on behalf of the city council. And actually, if we agree upon and we actually determine an amount, I don't know, placards are probably less than $100. And if each councilor have an amount that doesn't have to be discussed today, but that everybody knows that I have this amount on the budget and I can use it for something like that, or printing, perhaps when I spend some money in terms of giving a proclamation to a group of people that will come here, and I actually get few things. It's a matter of just having a discretionary budget that it shouldn't be huge, because we don't have a huge amount of money left, and most of the stuff here is salaries for the $15,000 the councilors get every year, and other things that are perhaps an obligation to the council, like the auditing and stuff like that. But I mean, if it is on discretion that could be communicated with the councilors, I would like you to think about it and probably communicate with everybody. I don't want to throw you an amount, but I wanted to just put put it up there and make sure that we discuss that if it's possible. And that way, we all know this is something that is there for councilors to use.
Thank you, Counselor. Yes.
Councilors, any other questions? Councilor De Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems sometimes, Council President, kind of frustrating what we go through. We are the body that spend, give, and approve so much money, and we have one of the littlest budget. We limit it even to coffee back there. We got to buy our own coffee. I mean, it's not important, but at least in the budget, we need to have some type of recognition. Not in our salary, but in the way we perform. It's a shame that the mayor's office had to provide us with pen, because we didn't have, or we couldn't buy pen. I'm assuming, I don't know. So going with my colleague right next to my left, Councilor Rodriguez, we need to have some type of little bank that we can decide on stuff that we might need and not a big hassle. I mean, again, we are the body that actually move all the money around. We can say the whole city. And we are the body that has the less money to play with for ourselves. So I think we need to do something about our budget, not just, again, not talking about salary, but stuff just simple like pens. I mean, city pens. I mean, it's a shame that mayor's office had to buy us city pens. And we appreciate all the city flags that you gave us, which is pretty cool. And probably you bought it on your own money. And that shouldn't be fair. I think we should have a bigger budget that we can, I mean, something that we can do for ourselves in our office and sometimes for our constituents.
So what I would say is, Councilor De Rosario, I think when you say bigger budget, I think, folks outside might be thinking, oh, he's talking about like $1 million. It's not even that. We're talking about is a couple $100s to be able to do certain things. What I've seen some bodies do, Council President, is that they've allocated a certain amount of dollars per, individual members to do things like plaques or to do other things that they have to, like get a receipt for, or like there are processes that with that. And I think that might be something interesting to explore. But I agree with the sentiments of my colleagues that I wish that, a lot of people think that being a city councilor is like a full-time $90,000, $100,000 job. And then what I tell folks, I'm like, well, it's full-time in the sense that, when you're out there at the supermarket, or it's 11 o'clock. I mean, I got a call at 2 in the morning for a fire, right? So, you're working all the time, but it's definitely, everybody that does this because they, we like what we're doing. We're probably putting in a lot more, as far as our own income than the small stipend that we received. Councilors, there's no, Councilor Rodriguez?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like, Council President, for you to go over the budget in terms of what is the budget for the city council and what is the actual salaries and stuff like that, so people knows up there what we're talking about, because I mean, people might think that we're talking about millions of dollars.
Sure. So very simply, so our staff is relatively small. I mean, each one of us, regular counselors get 15,000, council president gets 17,000. We do hire people who help with the audio visuals, and they're paid. They're paid as well for their work, as well as the folks who are working here, taking the notes, transcribing, and doing that. A big part of our budget deals with, we purchase the audits. I mean, the audit every year comes out of our office. We do have the ability to print and mail things and send things out, which includes, of course, postings. Traditionally, we also, we have, and what I'm trying to do, frankly, is and this is why the LCAT thing is so important to all of us, is we're trying to get this room upgraded. I mean, right now, if our residents are watching us on television on Channel 22, we used to have many more camera locations, but we've lost a few camera locations, and so now we're only getting from a couple of spots. So this discussion that we're having with LCAT is absolutely critical, and I'm working with John Mejia to get an invoice over to them so they can upgrade the cameras and do some other things to make the experience of government better. Of course, we have standard operating supplies that we redo every year, whether it's the pens, whether it's the paper, or anything like that. Frankly, I'm looking to do some cost savings with respect to some of this stuff. I mean, I realize a lot of us have the tools. I mean, we have technology. If you need a laptop, if you need an iPad, if you need a phone, these are things that the IT department has been able to provide to us. So to me, I think a lot of it is making sure we have our tools, that we can do our jobs as best as possible. So we do have that. And now, one of the big things, I think, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, I really do sense that we're shifting a little bit to more citations and more resolutions, because I think we're going in that direction. So we're going to need to pump up those supplies a little bit, so then we go to an event, whatever the event is. It used to be at a time that only the mayor would come with the mayor's thing, and now, isn't it nice that when we go, we can have a presentation and all that. So that costs a little bit of money with the right paper and the right all that stuff. So that's important, I think. It's important to many of us. And so we're going to make sure that that's funded for that purpose. But overall, that's, of course, we have one full-time salary staff who works for us full-time. And so she's listed in this as well. So that's an overview of our expenditures.
Follow-up from Councilor Rodriguez.
Just to clarify up there, what is our budget? For fiscal year 2023, the current city council budget that is being recommended is $335,000, 246. Out of that, 211,000 is going to salaries for councilors and the current staff that we have. And from that money, the $335,000, $70,000 goes to an audit that is by law required that the city council carries. So after that, there is a few supplies and so other things, a couple other things, about $40,000, $45,000 that goes to everything else that the council do. So that way people are clear that this is the city council's budget, $335,246 for this year.
And before I leave, I just want to say one more thing. I know that one of our colleagues here had a question regarding the pens. We have plenty of pens. I made sure that when I purchased the pens during the
Plenty of what? I'm sorry?
pens. We got plenty of pins. Last year, before the end of the year, we were able to get some pins, not pens, although we did get these as well. But if you need pins, let me know. We've got some on stash here that we can make sure you get for whatever the purposes are, whether it's acknowledging people or whatever it is.
Thank you, Council President. I think Council De Rosario, when he was talking about the pins, he wasn't talking about just the flags, he was talking about the pins with the seal. But that's great that we have the flag ones. Hopefully we can get these as well. I just want to echo what my colleagues are saying. Councilor Rodriguez did say there's a $211,000 that goes to salaries. I think it's important to note that 9 out of the 10 employees of the city council, they make between 15 to 17,000. So councils make 15,000. Council president gets paid an extra $2,000. Big money. And we have a confidential secretary that makes 55,000. And I would say, like, for the past few years, I have been saying that I think our confidential secretary deserves to get paid more. Throughout this budget, I see plenty of confidential secretaries making a lot more than that. So it's a little shocking that, when you see a confidential secretary making $110,000, I'm not saying that there's no reason for that person to make that money, but when you see the work that our secretary does and how she's available at all times for us, it pains me to see that her salary is still there. But that being said, thank you so much, Council President, and we will move on to the next item. The mayor's office The Chief of Staff told me that he will not be able to attend today. Something came up, so we're going to have to reschedule that presentation. So we'll move on to Administration and Finance. We have Office of Budget and Finance next. Director Ianello, if you can let us know what page number
Yes.
you're working on.
We'll start on page 27. I'm sorry, 30, sorry, 30, read the wrong line. That's the mayor's budget. Page 30 is the place to start, and that's the Department of Administration and Finance at a high level, kind of rolled up, so I just wanted to run through the departments that are under the CAFO. So it's the Office of Budget and Finance, the Comptroller's Office is included in CAFO, the Purchasing Department, the Information Technology Department, the Assessor's Office, the Treasurer and Collector's Office, and then the Office of Personnel. So those are all the departments within my division. So on page 30 is just a roll-up of the grand total of those, all of those budgets are $3.475 million for all of those departments. So the details of each of these departments begins on page 31. And that's the Office of Administration of Finance, my department. It's just, I carry a budget analyst in this division. It's just myself and the budget analyst are the two employees of this division. And I have a few, I have a line item for employee training of $7,000 in this budget, and then just some, a few dollars for office supplies and some dues and memberships. That's to belong to the Governmental Finance Officers Association and one other small, the Mass Governmental Finance Officers Association as well. And that's about all we have in that department. As I mentioned, the budget analyst is not filled at this time. We're waiting for the salary to be ordinanced, increase the ordinance the salary so we can fill the position, because it's in the budget at $62,000, and that's what we paid the last budget analyst. But the ordinances require maximum I can hire is between $35,000 and $45,000. So I can't fill that position until that gets changed. So that's a work in process right now with the Collins Center trying to update our salary classification plan. On page 33 is the Comptroller's Department, and page 33 and 34. So on page 34 are the employees that are in the Comptroller's Department. Ramona Sabalos, our Comptroller, is on vacation, so she'll be here tomorrow night or on Thursday. But I do have a few members of my staff that are here today. Just if they could just stand up briefly so I can introduce them. But Donna Cole's our payroll director. She's in this budget, Donna. Janelle V. Martinez is our purchasing agent. I'm not sure if you've all met her. And Gina LaGreca, I know you've all met Gina. And of course, I have Perla Ortiz, our treasurer collector, and Alex Vega, our chief assessor. And way in the back is Carlos Castillo. He's our IT director. I think you've all met him. But these are all the people that make things happen for the CAFO. And this budget in particular, Ramona's not here, but she will be here before the meetings are over. Ramona Sabalos did the bulk of the work on this budget. It's really, she did a phenomenal job getting all this stuff done, because it really is a bear to put this, all these numbers together and get them neat and concise for the council. So anyway, I was just going through the Comptroller's office. The Comptroller, there's an assistant Comptroller, there's an accountant, the payroll director, we have a payroll specialist, and a couple principal clerks. One of the principal clerks works on payroll. The other principal clerk generally does the accounts payable portion of the office. You can see in the other than personal services budget, there's a little bit of employee training. That's for some of the classes that Ramona attends. She's a CPA, not only a certified public accountant, but she's also now a certified governmental accountant, which is a certification that Department of Revenue or the Massachusetts Accountants and Auditors Association as a program to certify town accountants. So anyway, Ramona satisfies both of those. If I could switch on page 35 and 36 is the purchasing department. Again, you have the purchasing director and then a principal accounts clerk that's included in this division. The increases in salary are for both of those positions that are noted here are collectively bargained for increases, so we've provided for that. The item of note in the purchasing office is there's advertising, usually of around $10,000. That was cut from, advertising was cut from everybody's budget and inserted into the mayor's office, so he'd have, could see what's getting advertised and where, and he was interested in trying to save some money for the city by trying to pool everything together. So that's the big change in her budget, is a decrease in the advertising. All of the departments will still be responsible for their advertising, but the mayor's office has offered to pay those bills and see if they can get some savings in between all of the departments combined. On page 37 and 38 is the information technology department. Again, there's really no changes to the salaries in this department, but this department has, we level funded it the same as the prior year. We're gonna do the best we can to maintain that. But this budget is pays for our ERP system, all of the copiers in the city, all of the other IT computers and so forth that go on within the city department, or within all the city departments. So the largest item of which is the ERP system, which is over $400,000 per year.
Councilor Rodriguez?
The ERP system, our Munis operating system, on page 37, that's included in a line item, other purchase services. There's $685,324. Our ERP system is about $400 and something thousand per year, of which the school kicks in a little over $100,000. We pick up, $250,000 to $300,000 of that. All the copiers within the city are all paid for out of this line item. All the phones and cell phones are paid out of the telephone and telegraph line item, and that's throughout all of the city. They're all centrally paid by the IT department to make sure all the gadgets work together and are not conflicting. Laptops can't be conflicting with the equipment that they maintain. And that's about it in a nutshell. Those are the large items off the top of my head. There's a bunch of other programs that are paid for. Biggest one, Microsoft products for the entire city comes out of that line item. That's a big item as well. In the page 39 and 40 is the assessor's office. Again, we have on page 40 are all the salaries for the department. There's a chief assessor and 2 assessors, and there's our principal account clerk as well. There's on the largest item in their budget is $171,000. That's the professional service contract with RRC, who does all our inspection of all our properties annually. Let's see, on page 41 and 42 is the treasurer's office, or the treasurer/collector's office. This is the treasurer's side. Again, there's the treasurer collector, 1/2 of her time is charged on the treasurer, and 1/2 of her time is charged on the collector side. There's an assistant treasurer, 2 principal account clerks, all dealing with treasury functions. Again, as you can see in this line item, or this budget on page 41, the advertising was cut from $10,000 and moved to the mayor's office. That advertising on the treasurer's side is for the advertising the tax liens and the delinquent properties. On page 43 and 44 is the collector side of the operation. And on the collector side, as I mentioned, is half of the tax collector's salary, along with a principal clerk, a head cashier, and 2 cashiers to run the collection side of the operation. There pretty much are no changes to the line items in their budget. Changed a total of $880, all attributable to salary changes, collectively bargained salary changes. Let's see, and last of the departments is the Office of Personnel. Again, there's no changes to the personnel side, but on the personnel side, you have the personnel director, a confidential secretary, a personnel aide, and a benefits aide. So there's 4 positions in the personnel department. Again, no major changes to their expenditure other than salary line items. So that takes me through the Office of Administration and Finance.
Thank you, Director Ianello. Councilors, are there any questions? I'm sorry, Councilor Rodriguez?
I have a question. I have a few questions, but I mean,
Go ahead, Councilor Rodriguez.
it's gonna take a little bit. Essentially, I would like, if you can help me, Ianello, we have different departments here in different positions that are probably here that they can speak on behalf of what they're doing. So essentially, for the benefit of the taxpayers, I would like to extend an invitation to the one that are present to explain to what they're doing for the city and how they benefit the community. In a few words, doesn't have to be extent, but I mean just saying a few things of how they serve the community.
Sure. Well, let me see if they can come up one at a time and just give a 2-sentence depiction of what they do. Maybe we'll start with Alex, because everybody knows what Alex does, and he can explain it in a couple minutes.
Ali won't fit her in two sentences. He does too much.
Good evening, councilors. Alexi Vega, Chief Assessor for the City of Lawrence, 14 Cornish Road. As Mark mentioned, the staff in the office is comprised of 4 full-time employees. Our major responsibilities is to determine the full and fair cash market value of all real estate and personal property on a yearly basis and submit those numbers to the state for certification. We come before the board when the values are certified to present a tax classification and inform the city councilors on which factor to adopt that would be most beneficial to not just every taxpayer, but to the residential taxpayers of the city of Lawrence. And I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Evening, councilors. I know I've seen you many times recently. Gina LaGreca, I'm the Director of Personnel. Our department, handles all the hiring needs for the city side of things, excluding the school. We also do all employee health care benefits, as well as assist in some of the retirement benefits as well. I conduct investigations when there are complaints of harassment, sexual or otherwise, in the workplace and City Hall, and basically just assist every department with their personnel needs as well. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Seems like there's no questions.
Good evening, Janelle V. Martinez, 134 Marsden Street, purchasing agent or director of purchasing or chief procurement officer as delegated by the state. My main job is to have every department and counselor, anyone spending money through the purchasing department, through contracts or our ERP systems such as Munis, making sure it all follows Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30B. So city contracts, DPW contracts, or something as simple as the pins and the pens that you're looking for, all of those are regulated through our system and through purchasing.
Councilors, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle.
Good evening, Donna Cole. I reside at 1 Carmel Drive, Londonderry, New Hampshire. My department is in charge of paying the entire city. That's police department, fire department, city hall, DPW, and we also oversee the city payroll department. We're in charge of doing W-2s, all the quarterly 941s, multiple state reportings that we do. So we're in charge of a lot of different things. If you have any questions?
Questions? None. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Perla Ortiz. I reside at 27 Lisa Lane, and I'm the city treasurer, tax collector, so I'm in charge of basically collecting all of the real estate, personal property, motor vehicle, water and sewer, as well as the 40U liens. I also handle all the revenue that comes in, all the money that comes in and gets deposited, I'm in charge of, and also debt management. So any debt services when we go out to borrow, basically, I will be the person in charge for that. If you have any questions.
No questions, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Carlos? By the way, Perla also, as she mentioned, does the debt management. We have a lot of debt, and keeping track of all those debt schedules is very tricky, but she's got it in a very large spreadsheet, so that's how we keep track of things.
Good evening, councilors. Carlos Castillo, MIS Director for the City of Lawrence. I reside in 8 Greenwood Street, Lawrence, Mass. My responsibility is maintaining the infrastructure for the City of Lawrence. Infrastructure means communications that is provided for the fire department, police department, and also it's our responsibility to provide the tools, the technology tools, so everyone within City Hall, fire, police, and including the councilors, to do their job as well.
Councilors, any questions? None. Thank you so much, Carlos. Councilors, are there any other questions for Director Ianello? Seeing none, we will move on to other financial uses.
Counselor, that's on page 161. And there's just a few items in this line item. This is our, I just wanted to explain, let me just get to the page.
Director Ianello, you said 161, correct?
161, yep. Flipping to that page as we speak. So included in this category are three main items, which is the, and you can see it on page 161, it's called transfers to capital projects. That's our required Chapter 58 reserve of 1.5% of our prior year tax levy has to be set aside for pay-go capital projects. So that's part of our Chapter 58 bailout legislation. So that's $1,218,833. So we're required to put that in our budget every year. The next is our contingency reserve account, a really sour imposition adjustment account. And that's $1 million that I have is for the, all of the contracts, all of the departmental, most of the departments or all of the departmental contracts, collective bargaining agreements expired at 6/30/22. So 6/30/23, they all, we haven't negotiated those collective bargaining agreements yet, but so I'm setting aside approximately $1 million to settle all of those collective bargaining agreements across the city. So that's in this line item as well. Last year, we only had a couple of unions that were not settled at the, when we put the budget together, so it was only $200,000 in the prior year. But this year, all of the contracts expired, so we had to set aside more money in this line item. So that we're hoping we can keep all our collective bargaining to that $1 million number, and that's where we'll pay for it out of this account. And then lastly is a fiscal stability fund. That's $251,228. That's another required reserve that came with our another legislation back in I believe 1994 or 1991. I think it's 1994. It requires us to set aside again. I believe it's 2.5% of the prior year's not tax levy, but prior year's operating budget to be set aside in a reserve account. And that reserve is approximately it's a little over $4 million, $4.3 million. And we have to increase that reserve balance to equal that 2.5% number. So every year, this year, the amount we have to increase it is $251,000. Prior year, we only had to put aside $92,000, and it changes each year depending on the operating budgets of the city and whatever that 2.5% number is. But again, it's required by that legislation from 1994, and it was to ensure that the city has a balance on their books. And like I said, it's approximately 4.5 million, and it can be used for any purpose that the city would need, but whatever we use it for, we have to put it back in the following year. So it's really just something to make sure the city has a savings account set aside. We have far more than that because we have obviously our a 14+ million in free cash, and we have other reserve accounts as well. We have a stabilization reserve. We have a reserve there's still a couple $1 million from the Columbia Gas Reserve that we still have. So we have other reserves besides that, but it's required legislation. The Department of Revenue checks my number every year to make sure we've set that money aside. So that's in the budget as well. So that comprises other financial uses.
Councilors, any questions?
Yes, do you
Councilor Levy?
Yes. You said there is some other reserve account. Why is not in here?
Say that again, Councilor. I didn't understand the question.
Yes. Yes. Some other forms. Yes. So you said that there is some other forms that why it's not in here. It's not reflecting in here.
I'm not sure I understood the question, so.
Yeah, you mentioned
Yeah.
that there are some other forms.
Oh, there's other funds available.
Yes,
other
other
at the-
forms
yeah.
available. Yes, but it's not being reflected in here.
Yeah, this isn't the balance sheet. Those are reflected on the city's balance sheet. They're not reflected in the budget. But again, they're reserves that we have available to use. We're not, the only thing in the budget here is what we're planning on spending next year. And so we do have some free cash that I mentioned, 4.8 million, to offset the operating budget because because of the increased debt service, as I mentioned, and we're not going up the full tax levy for the residents. So we need to use that, but all the other reserves are still, we don't plan on spending those, so they're not included in the budget. But just off the top of my head, I can tell you, I actually have the details with me, but our free cash balance is roughly 14+ or 15 million. The fiscal stability reserve required by 1994 legislation is approximately 4.5 million. We have a stabilization fund of approximately 1.2 million. We have a Columbia Gas Reserve, which is the remainder of the Columbia Gas money. It's about 2.4 million remaining. And then, of course, there's some reserve funds for the water sewer, and the airport has some reserve funds as well. So those are all of the reserves off the top of my head in a nutshell that we do have, but they're not reflected here in the budget because we're not going to spend them. We're going to keep them saved.
Thank you.
Councilors, any other question? Councilor Rodriguez.
Can you please, Director Anelo, can you please send us the reserve fund list?
The balance,
The
sure.
balance sheet.
Those, off the top of my head, I just indicated what they are, but I'll stick them on a spreadsheet and send you the balances. Also, because we have our FY21 audit done, there also will show up in the audit report, so that'll be an agenda item I'm going to put on for the next city council meeting, the audit reports from FY21. So you'll have those audit reports and you can see the reserves yourself, but I'm going to send you a little email with what the reserves are and how much.
And through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, follow up.
And perhaps some details as of how we get those funds. You mentioned that Columbia
The
Gas
background of what
funds.
they are, sure, yeah.
Yeah, what they are, the definition of each, and why you just mentioned that the fiscal stabilization fund came up because of a state law that requires this for each city and stuff like that. Details on each one,
Yeah.
as of why if they're a requirement or if they are just something that we decide to do. I know that a couple of years ago you start doing a fund that we've been putting some money on. And I don't know if that's a statutory thing or that's something that is for, to ensure that the city is.
Yeah, there's,
better
some of these are required reserves, as I mentioned, just a moment ago, under other financial uses, the Chapter 58 reserve, 1.2 million, we have to set aside for pay-go capital projects, but I'll give you a brief, a sentence or two on each of the funds and what they can be used for, and what the balances are, current balances are.
Thank you so much.
Councilors, any other questions? Seeing none, if we can move on to employee benefits.
So employee benefits are on page 157, 157. And the largest item in this category is our group insurance commission, or GIC, our health insurance. We're estimating $15,430,000 for this year, this upcoming year. We have also the larger item on here. It's called other assessment, but that's really our pension assessment. It's our pension assessment from the contributory retirement system. So that's $10.9 million. So those are the two largest items in this category. Some of the other items that we have to fund just from the top is there's $19,926 for non-contributory pensions. Those are people who retired or back in the 30s and 40s, and they're still or worked back in the 30s, I think prior to 1938. Let's see, we have unemployment compensation, a budget request of $150,000. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot of layoffs, so we haven't had a big hit to it, but we'll budget the same as we did the last year. We did spend $184,000 FY21, but so far at FY22, we've only spent $44,000, so we're hoping the $150 will be enough. Medicare is the 1.45% required employer match. As the City of Lawrence, the employer, we have to match the 1.45 deducted out of all employees' pay, or at least those who worked prior to 1983 or 88. Let's see, I mentioned the group insurance commission, that's $15.4 million. That's our health insurance estimate for next year. We have group life. We do, the city covers a couple $1,000s for every city employee for life insurance, and that premium is $9,000. And then our, the employer share of the dental insurance for employees is $608,000. In addition to this, under employee benefits, we're requesting, we reserve, every year we reserve, well, last several years we reserved $400,000 for injured in the line of duty payments. So we try and, when a firefighter or police officer is injured in the line of duty, instead of leaving them on their fire or police department payroll, we kind of move them over to this reserve, so we can, it offsets a little bit the police and fire, so they don't have to feel the full brunt of someone when they're injured. We also have uncompensated absence reserve, and that's money we set aside in a reserve fund for the, when people retire and they get a buyout for the balance of their sick leave or their vacation or whatever. Some of those payments have been, can be quite extraordinary. So we've been setting money aside in a reserve, trying to lessen the brunt of that on departmental operating budgets. And then the last reserve is the workers' compensation reserve. So police and fire have injured in the line of duty reserve. This is for all the other city employees, and we propose $350,000 going into the workers' comp reserve fund. So when people get injured on the job, they moved over to this fund and not impact the operating budget of the department. So the total of all of those employee benefits totals $29,000,003,308. So it's a lot of, our employee benefits are quite high, but we seem to manage them as best we can.
Councilors, any questions? Councilor Rodriguez.
Hi, again. Director Anello, again, we're gonna have the same conversation as 3 years ago. And I will give you details.
Yep.
On the group insurance commission, fiscal year 2020, we actually budget for $15,300,000. The actual expenditure for that year was 14.2 millions, about. That was $1.1 million extra money that we budgeted for, but we didn't spend. In fiscal year 2021, we actually budget $15,300,000, and the actual expenditure was $14,263,000. So we actually budget about $1.1 million above what we need. And last year, we actually have a budget of $50 million with a cut of $300,000. But we're not going to get to that 15 million. So 15 million was a very conservative number, and we're not going to get there based on the trending and the percentage that they're increasing. If you look at the percentage or the increasement, it's about less than 200,000 a year, but we always keep on budgeting about $1 million above what we need. So this year, we actually put back that 300,000 that we got last year, plus 150,000 more. So this year we're budgeting 15,430,000.
That's for '23.
That's for 23, yeah.
This
For-
year,
for
and the
fiscal
year
year.
we're in, FY '22, it's 15 million.
Yeah, it's 15 million, and we have a cut of 300,000 compared to previous years.
Yep.
Why is it that we actually budgeting about $1 million more when we should, I know that we should be a little conservative on that, but not go $1 million above, because if we look at the numbers from previous years, we keep on having that 900,000, $1 million above, and that become free cash. But free cash down the road is something that, you know, if we increase in taxes today, it's something that the people are paying for it. And we don't need. I mean, I don't want to go back again to the discussion of how much taxes it could be in terms of percentage, but because we're not increasing taxes this year, so we're not going to go that route. But I think that we should be looking at these numbers a little bit more
Well, Council,
less conservative.
let me just explain where we are in FY '22. We have budgeted 15 million, and we estimate the expenditures at June 30th will be 14.9 million. So we're only going to have about $100,000 left this year, hopefully. Hopefully, we'll end the year below 15 million. We have a couple of months still to post. But Ramona and I just looked at it a couple of weeks ago, and the estimate is, for each month we track the actual payment versus the budgeted payment, and the estimate for FY '22 is closer to 14.9 million. So we have budgeted 15 million. We think we're safe. In FY '23, we did get new rates from the GIC. We have an accountant in Ramona's office who extrapolates those numbers and applies them to the current amounts that are used this year. And so she came up with 15.43 million next year, all things being equal. So it is, the last couple of years we got lucky. I don't know if the mix of employees, we budgeted 15 million, we only spent 14.2 in 20 and 21. However, in 22, we're back up to 14.9 million. So, 15.4 million is a reasonable number. I hate to drop it down to 15 million. I think we're going to exceed 15 million next year with the rate increases that GIC implemented. So that's going to cost us some dough. But, we do the best we can with these worksheets. It's not an exact science. At the beginning of the year, there's X number of people on single and family plans. And during the year, people can switch. They can go from a family back to a single or a single up to a family. So it's not an exact science when we put these numbers together. We're just using averages based on the number of people who have certain plans, and then what the increase in those estimated planned costs will be and what's our employer's share. We pay 75 and the employee pays 25%. So we do the best we can. I think in FY 2022, you'll see that when the year's over, we're going to be closer to 14.9 million when the last bill is paid.
All right, no, I mean, I feel like this is something that we're gonna keep on having this discussion until I'm here in the council. And every time, kind of like, I keep on saying, look, we budget almost $1 million above what we need. And this year is like I was saying, I'm gonna repeat myself, and I'm gonna talk about what that means in terms of taxes, because we're not increasing taxes, at least the proposition 2.5. But in a year that is kind of like tight and difficult for people up there, that we're increasing taxes, that means something. So I'm gonna keep on track of what this number means, and all the small numbers that mean that it probably means a couple of 100,000 here and there for a very conservative budgeting process. And I'm not criticizing that, because I think that's basically what take us to where we are, a healthy city in terms of money. But it is important to look at those. And I believe that we're gonna keep on looking at those numbers. You have your points, I have mine, and let's see what happens next year.
Well, again, I've got the actual bills to see. I think you're just speculating, well, we only spent 14.9 million, but you have to actually look at all the details as well. There's quite a bit of detail that goes into this calculation, which.
No, I mean, I wait. You say
I really bring it up.
14.9 millions. I mean, I wait until next year to see if I'm still here, to see those numbers.
Councilors, any other questions? All right, thank you, Director Iannello. I will say that I think that point, the GIC has been a point of discussion, at least with myself. I know with Councilor Rodriguez as well for the last 4 years. If the budget, I think it's one thing if we are off by 200, 300,000. In the past, we sometimes were off by close to $1 million. If it comes down, that's 14.9, then I think that this increase makes a lot of sense. And I hope that as we are thinking about next year, we are making sure that we're getting as close as possible to what is actual. That being said, if there's no other question, thank you, Director Iannello. Thank you to all the department heads, everyone that has been waiting here and presented today. Thank you for all the work that you do for this city. And thank you to all those that took part in producing this book. All right, so thank you all for your services. Councilors, we have items tomorrow. Tomorrow, our next meeting is at 6:30 p.m. here in these chambers. Please be aware that the Greater Lawrence Technical School has, you all should have gotten their budget. It should have been in your mailbox already. And we are expecting to get the budget book from Lawrence Public Schools by Thursday. If there are no other items, if there's a motion to recess. There's a motion to recess by Councilor Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Levy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.